A political revolution is underway in British politics. Just look at the opinion polls. Reform are now sitting streets ahead of both Labour and the Tories on 35% of the vote. In fact, both of the big parties recently fell below 20% of the national vote each. And their fundamental values, Reform's values, seem to be shining through. A bombshell new poll today says that 68% of British people, more than two-thirds, clearly understand what Reform UK stand for, compared to just 59% who say the same about the Tories and only 56% who say the same about the Labour Party. There is a serious political movement taking shape here. Now, the Tories are in freefall, with leader Kemi Badenoch failing to cut through in either the press or in Parliament. I don't know about you, but look at PMQs this week. It wasn't a great performance by the official leader of the opposition. The Labour government, meanwhile, is imploding, with Angela Rayner and Lucy Powell's sudden departures paving the way for today's big reshuffle, the beginning of phase 2, we were told. Well, many Brits feel that they have only one vehicle left. Today, party leader Nigel Farage set out what Reform's priorities in government will be. Check this out.
But in the middle of this meltdown of these two parties that have dominated for 100 years British politics, in the middle of all of this, there is a new, strong, unified party that speaks with one voice, that knows it's determined to put the interests of Britain and the British people above that of outdated international treaties or dubious courts. We are the patriotic party. We are the party that stands up for decent working people, and we are the party on the rise.
Now, Reform also talked about what a Reform government might look like. Here's what Nigel Farage had to say about how he hopes to pick his future cabinet.
I don't believe that all governments have to be MPs in the House of Commons. That's the convention, but it doesn't work, does it? You appoint people to be a rail minister, an education secretary who have no knowledge of the department they're supposed to run. And we will bring in a ministry of all the talents from all walks of life, and to hell with convention.
And Nigel Farage also seems hopeful that the Labour Party's worsening divisions will open up opportunities for Reform UK in the weeks and years ahead.
Before long, there'll be Labour MPs that reckon they've got a better chance on the Jeremy Corbyn sectarian ticket, because frankly, folks, that's what's going on in our country. We have sectarian politics emerging. I loathe it. I loathe it. But there'll come a point when many MPs, Labour MPs, think they've got a better chance of being re-elected under that ticket, under Corbyn, than they do under Sir Keir. I think there is every chance now of a general election happening in 2027, and we must be ready for that moment.
But you know what? Reform's potential path to government will not be without challenges. And I'll be honest, the defection of Boris Johnson ally Nadine Dorries didn't seem to go down especially well among some of the people I met today. Many members have doubts over figures that have also joined Reform in recent months. Jake Berry as an example. And the relatively new party has already seen more than its fair share of infighting. So is Nigel Farage right to say that he could lead a Reform government by 2027? That's the question I want to debate tonight, looking at the opportunities and the challenges for the Reform movement. Well, I'm joined in the studio now by Lambeth councillor, prominent left-wing commentator Martin Abrams. Martin.
Good evening, Matt.
What's your view of what you saw today?
Well, it was rather overshadowed, the conference, wasn't it, by what happened in the Labour Party, Angela Rayner's political career imploding, you know, the unplanned reshuffle that Keir Starmer had to bring forward from the date they were ultimately planning. And I think what you said about Nadine Dorries is right, Matt. it wasn't a shock that Nadine Dorries joined Reform. I actually thought she joined before, but that's because I'm getting confused by how many former Tories are joining the Reform Party. I think we're up to double figures in terms of former Tory MPs. So Reform, kind of inexplicably, are taking on former Tory MPs, the very MPs that were the architects of the country, essentially ending up on its knees, public services crumbling, the general population just really angry at the state of the country, and Reform are welcoming into the party with open arms.
Now, Nigel Farage and his team would say, look, we need people who know how Parliament works, who have the experience, who understand the legislative process, etc., etc. So, they would throw that in there. I also spoke to one activist today, very interesting, who said, look, I don't mind so many former Tories coming in, but I need to see some other people now. I need to see some former Labour people, some independent people, maybe some former Lib Dem people, maybe some celebrities or some business people. There was definitely a sense that, OK, we can't just keep having former Tory, said the activist. So what do you think about that?
Well, I still think there's a certain toxicity to Reform amongst, the general public. They're not
35%.
Well,
35%
they're pulling ahead
of
all the other parties, but a lot of the general public still find the Reform prospect a very toxic, quite a scary prospect. So they're not appealing to the wider political, audience there.
What about
going back to Nadine Dorries as well? I do find it bizarre that Nigel Farage, he flew all the way to the US to basically protest about, freedom of speech and how, how we're having draconian laws here about like the online safety bill. Nadine Dorries was the person that implemented the online safety bill when she was a Tory cabinet minister. So sure. and now Reform are welcoming her into the party as if she didn't have anything to do with that.
One of the things that I've written in the recent past is the idea of Reform having a sort of pledge card whereby anybody who joins has to say, we oppose mass immigration, oppose net zero, oppose the Boris wave, the wave of migration under Boris Johnson, for example. Do you think something like that would be a good idea, where you take somebody like Nadine Dorries and you say, OK, you were involved in this government that presided over arguably the collapse of the country. Can you just firmly disassociate yourself from that regime?
I don't think you can. Not if you're continuing to accept former Tory MPs. The Reform kind of mould themselves as the party of anti-establishment. But I'm sorry to say, at the moment, they are looking very, very establishment. And, it is important to say, Nigel Farage, man of the people.
Okay.
I live a couple of miles away from where he went to school, Dulwich College, £60,000 a year to go to that college.
Hold that thought. We're just going to bring in the panel, commissioning editor at The Spectator, Lara Brown, and contributing editor for Novara Media, Michael Walker. Lara, let me just start with you. Do you see something in this point about internal challenges and tensions and defections?
Yeah, I think this is a major problem. I have to confess, I'm in the 30% of people who've got no idea what Reform stands for. 1 minute, Reform's big pledge is we're going to undo the Online Safety Act. The next minute, they've brought in the architect of the Online Safety Act onto their benches. We've got the same with net zero. We're told Reform want to get rid of it. So why is Jake Berry, the person who brought in net zero and was very involved in its architecture, now involved with Reform? It's becoming very difficult from their personnel. You've got lead councillors calling for more care worker visas to work out what Reform believes.
So what should Nigel Farage do in order to manage that? Because in fairness to Nigel Farage, what he would say if he was here is, look, I can't go into government and run all these government departments with people who have never been in politics before. I need experienced people. I need people who can manage the civil service, the policy process.
I mean, what's the point of someone whose experience is in doing something that Farage believes was bad for the country? That seems very strange to me.
Michael Walker.
I mean, it would be more impressive if they'd got some sitting Conservative MPs, because at the moment it's not just establishment politicians, it has been establishment politicians. Like, it would be a vote of confidence in the party if there were some Tory MPs who thought, we're more likely to keep our seats with Reform than staying with the Conservative banner. But these are people who don't have jobs anyway. So it's not like Nadine Dorries is taking a big risk by joining Reform. She's got nothing else to do.
But do you think, perhaps mirroring some of the tensions on the left between the Corbynistas and the Blairites and so on, there is an inherent tension here that Farage is going to have to negotiate, both with his members and activists? Look, I spoke to people today who said, look, I came into this movement to end mass immigration, end net zero, restore free speech, and, you know, there was a sort of a reluctant acceptance among some that, OK, we need some former MPs and we might not like everybody that we take. But there was also a sense of, look, I'm nervous.
I wouldn't overstate that. I mean, Nigel Farage is a charismatic leader. It's a bit like Donald Trump. So you can have some real wackos in the party and they sort of just go along with whatever they say. I think the bigger problem for Nigel Farage is what's been the big problem for Donald Trump, which is that the governing programme doesn't really make much sense. So you're saying you're going to reduce immigration, fine. Well, that means you're going to have to pay care workers a lot more, which means you're going to have to raise taxes. And what they keep saying is, oh, we're going to save all of this money by looking at council budgets and seeing where the waste is. Well, it turns out most money is spent on the NHS and pensions. So you can't just go in there and magic up loads of new money. You have to raise taxes. Hopefully, I would say on the rich, but that's not what they're offering.
Martin, Nigel Farage also said today, look, it's the divisions on the left that are going to bring about an early general election. He's working on the assumption that the departure of Angela Rayner and so on escalates these tensions, the Labour government fall under the weight of its own contradictions, and we are going to the polls as early as, you know, first few months of 2027. Do you agree with him on that?
No, I can't see the Labour Party in its current state looking towards an early general election. You know, it is an absolute shambles in Labour at the moment. You know, yesterday we had, was it phase 2? Today people are talking about phase 3 of Keir Starmer's, you know, reset. So, you know, they're polling really badly. Keir Starmer's personal polling is historically low. You know, the popularity of the Labour Party, a party that I have just left myself, is historically low. Right. And so I think what is happening today, Angela Rayner, basically a hatchet job by what I believe is people within her own party, briefing information to the right-wing press. Same thing happened with Louise Haigh. You know, it's not a coincidence that two of the most prominent soft-left MPs, some of the most popular MPs, have been done away with, you know, clearing a path for someone like Wesley Streeting, who is just obsessed with becoming Prime Minister, you know, to the point of, like...
but all of this, arguably, Nigel Farage is taking that big bet, is going to help reform UK. Those splits and divisions might divide the left and help reform UK.
I don't agree that there's going to be 80 MPs defecting to your party, though.
Hold that thought.